Okay, the latest on the Miami news. The judge has scheduled a hearing for tomorrow at 1:30 to determine whether or not he's going to accept his suit.
I have to cover the hearing this afternoon, and I have to write a story for tomorrow's paper, probably on the death of the newspaper.
We have a three-person enterprise team here. Mike Ward, who you've already talked to, Nancy McVicker, who's packing up her files too, and I have worked together for about 18 months. This is our little corner up here. And we're sort of like a newspaper SWAT team. They throw us out breaking news stories, and they also have us do some investigative projects. So we have been covering the news closing off and on for the last, well, since October 14th. Mike's been doing most of the day-to-day stuff. And what we're doing is the story that'll be the lead story in the last issue newspaper tomorrow, which is going to be mostly a factual piece about the events of today and whether or not they were successful in halting the closure of the newspaper.
There's a suit pending, which is going to court this afternoon. The bidders still say they want to buy the paper, and Cox won't deal. Cox says that they want to deal, but the bidders won't deal. And so there's a lot of fast-breaking developments this morning.
I'm going to, strangely enough, if you look at my attire, I'm going to a job interview. It's my third interview with a rival alternative paper in town. The first session took place in the El Toro Club on 79th Street in the Boulevard. The second session was about 4.5, 5 hours in the 1800 Club, and now we're supposed to go get a meal at it's either Joe's Seafood or Big Fish, somewhere on the Miami River. You can't give these people that interview you the impression that you're too well-heeled, because otherwise they'll have no incentive to try to hire you, so I try to look like...
People are saying pretty much what you would expect they would say. You know, there are people who haven't read the Miami news in years, and they're saying, gosh, it's a great loss for the community, which is what you'd expect. Nobody's... I'm trying real hard to find somebody who will say, good riddance, the paper sucks. And hopefully Joe Carollo will do that if he'll call me back, because he's probably the person in Miami who hates us more than anybody else.
I don't think any paper will have me. These people kind of took me off the streets. I was, you know, well, I wasn't kind of, I was unemployed, and they kind of...
Well, I think, you know, that's part of the professional ethic that we're all inculcated with, is to keep a stiff upper lip and to cover events as though we're not affected by them. We're supposed to be objective and unemotional, but that's really, I mean, that's just not real at all. There's an awful lot of anger. Yeah, Mike is getting a bulletin from the Justice Department, getting an update from the Justice Department. Sure.
This is how you find out if you have a future.
The antitrust investigation.
It's possible there'll be a development on that later today. Okay. All right. What's the next step as far as justice goes in this? Right. We're holding the paper. They're holding the paper. Turn around. Can you turn around and ask them right now?
So if the news is not sold, they lose their antitrust immunity. So they either have to sell the whole deal, JOA and all, or face antitrust prosecution, right? Okay.
Oh, yeah. 18, all 13. Hey, so we can the first edition. I got it out of there.
If Cox doesn't have a newspaper, the JOA can lose its antitrust immunity.
Nothing in here has any impact on this community. It might have impact on Cox, right? No? What? That's a true statement I just made?
It's not clear. If they go through with an antitrust suit, Could they try to force the paper to open back up?
They won't trust us.
Yeah, I know they won't.
How much time do they have to get reaction?
Have an impact on the community.
It's no big deal. No big deal for this community, except that basically they're saying that no change. No change. I just wish we could say whether or not one of the two avenues to keep the paper open has passed.
No, we can't say that.
Well, we can't say that, then we can't say much of anything. It's just gibberish. There's only one issue here. That's the only issue as far as I can see. Them saying we're threatening to sue Cox in the future. Who gives a shit?
I think it's significant that they say that that the Justice Department has concluded that the JOA would lose its antitrust immunity under the Newspaper Preservation Act once the amendment to it becomes effective.
What does that mean?
It means that if Cox doesn't have a paper, there ain't no JOA.
I don't think we can say that.
So what?
Cox loses $600 million.
I don't think that's what, it just means it loses its immunity from the Justice Department, and the Justice Department can look at it. So?
It's like a baby step closer to...
Well, this is a development in the story. I think there's a story there.
There's no question that that's going to be worth reporting, Mike. The question is it important enough to go an hour late on the paper? I mean, what's the reason?
That's your decision. There is a story there.
There is a story. Is the impact of what's there such that we want to hold the paper for now?
I don't know that we have to hold it an hour.
It's due off the board right now. It's on its way to the press room. By the time we get it written, set and typed, pasted up, new plates made, we're talking an hour.
Well, I mean, this is just as quick as we can get this.
I understand. I understand.
Good luck up there.
I repeat this. You can't say that one of the two potential avenues to keep the news open has passed. You can't make that statement. I don't think it's worth it.
I don't think we can say that.
Okay. So one tomorrow.
I don't know that it's worth the lead story in the newspaper. I'm telling you it's worth a new lead on that story.
I agree. If I had time, I would do it.
I just want to lead on the story.
If this were an hour ago, I'd say I agree with you. But it's not that kind of impact that there's any reason to hold it. Our readers will read about it in the Herald. And they'll read about it in my office. The Justice Department said that their main concern in the antitrust investigation would be whether or not Cox had made a good faith effort to sell the paper, which was the first time they said that. And they also said it was likely that Cox would lose its immunity in the antitrust prosecution if they didn't sell the paper, which is also the first time they've said that. And we were right on deadline, but Sue decided not to go with it.
No, you can't.
Oh, yeah. Put quote marks around the up
Well, wait a minute. You can do better than that. We can be more creative
Well,
than
you
that.
go ahead. There's a whole bunch more of them over there.
Where?
Knock your socks off. Over there where Leslie is, there's a whole bunch. That'll do. It says nothing of impact happened. What happened was that this morning, or at noon today, was that Mike Ward was making a check with the Justice Department, who, in a certain sense, control the fate of this newspaper right now. And he got an interview on deadline, right on deadline, really past deadline, although we've busted deadline for things that were later than this many times, in which the head of the antitrust division of the Justice Department said for the first time
that their key concern in the antitrust investigation, which is ongoing, was whether or not Cox Newspapers is making a bona fide good faith effort to sell this newspaper. And also new was the statement that it is likely, which is not certain, but it's still something stronger than they've ever said before, that the new joint operating agreement would lose its immunity from antitrust law if the paper isn't sold. And what that potentially means is anybody's guess, but it certainly means that there's a possibility of either civil or criminal prosecution of either Cox or Knight Ridder or both. And we were past deadline. It was about 5 minutes after 12. Mike wrote a new lead for the story that appears on 1A in today's editions. Nancy and I got reaction from Cox and Knight Ridder, and the decision was made not to use it, not to go into the paper on deadline and make a substitution, a change in that story. And that's the managing editor's decision to make. But we certainly have gone into the paper for front page stories as much as 25 minutes or more later than this.
Well, thank you. Same to you. Oh, yeah. I'll work my ass off. What I do, I'll be looking forward to it. I'm excited. Nice to hear from you, Tom. Happy to
Yeah, that's certain, unless somebody asks them to do otherwise.
Oh, most has got to be
All right. We wrote an editorial for the paper for tomorrow, the last editorial, and finishing a column to our letter writers over the years. I keep lists of, for my own needs, I keep a list of the letter writers that we receive, the names of the writers, the headlines, and the lengths of each of the letters. So as we go through, and I put them in the paper, I know how long they are in this writing. So I've got a pretty good list of some of our regular people, and I thought it would be nice to write a column and just put their names in it, because they really mean a lot to a newspaper. Letter writers do. You tend to forget that, take them for granted, but it's one of the best read sections of any newspaper. The letter writers column.
It says on here, keep this paper as a souvenir. It is the first paper ever published on beautiful Bay Biscayne, the southernmost newspaper on the mainland of the United States, published at the most southern railroad point in Uncle Sam's domain and at the most southern telegraph terminal and express office on the mainland at marvelous Miami.
The beginning of the editorial goes like this. Miami News has tried, with imperfect efforts and results, to lead public opinion along the sinuous, uphill, and endless path towards social justice, equality, and opportunity based on individual achievement. The news has retained its integrity by adhering to its beliefs that the use of stereotypes undermines attempts to promote equal opportunity, that a community and a nation are only as strong as their weakest members, that natural resources must be protected rather than exploited, that public corruption breeds public and private cynicism, that unpopular defenses of constitutional rights protect the rights of all, that improved public education is essential to overwhelm the ignorance which subjugates the poor, that the people of the world must share common desires and goals which must, if the world is to survive, transcend the often self-serving political differences that separate governments. Although this is its final edition, the Miami News will always remain on the high moral plateau where it has stood upright for so long, and so often alone, to be discovered again and again by historians, archivists, and average citizens interested in learning how Miamians lived and what some of them stood for, from May 15, 1896 until the last day of 1988.
Which page is this?
This is an inside page that's going to be used in the special section that we're putting out, souvenir section of previous front pages. from 1901 to 1987.
What are some of the headlines?
McKinley assassinated, 15,000 lives lost in the sinking of the Lusitania. Great World War ends this morning. November 11th, 1918. Lindbergh, hero of wild Paris. Kennedy is dead. Happy Havana awaiting Fidel's triumphal entry.
You don't like the word shell.
January 2nd, 1959, right after the New Year. Shuttle explodes. The dream comes true. The Miami Hurricanes are #1. And snow in Miami. That's January 19th, 1977.
And that's the last edition.
This is for Saturday's edition. Whether it's the last, we still do not know.
We're not old, individually. On this editorial page, we're not old, but we're old-fashioned in that we stand for those values, and we don't change just because public opinion is changing in those. We're determined, well, we were determined to try to turn public opinion around and come back to where we think it ought to be. It's like saying if in the 50s, if you went with public opinion, you stayed with separate but equal. You stayed with Jim Crow laws. That was what public opinion was for. You stayed with lynchings. If you didn't, if you're idealistic, you tried to change it. You didn't just go with the flow.
Now we're going to the Miami News souvenir section. Farewell section. I mean, the snow was a souvenir edition of that.
Yeah, it's a farewell section.
Yeah. That's picky.
You know, it's history story.
Yeah.
I don't like souvenir.
You don't like souvenir? No. What do you suggest?
Farewell. Historical, something like that. Souvenirs.
It's historical. Nothing really has to do with farewell other than it's in our last edition.
Guy.
We can't come up with anything better, we'll take that, but maybe we can come up with something better. It is a special section.
We just call it a special section.
Special section.
The generic.
She showed up from Tulsa, Oklahoma last week with her baby. Quit her job, just split on the family, hocked the TV, bought a bus ticket for $130, had $130 in her pocket. 3 days to get here, got a little bit of public housing assistance, went to the stadium, they helped her find a job, starts the job tomorrow, gets a new apartment out on Miami Beach tomorrow, and she says she feels like she's in the middle of a movie. It couldn't be this great. She's been swimming with the baby on the beach and just can't believe that it's 22 degrees back there in Tulsa. So it was real poignant for me because she was homeless and with no job, and I'm going to be jobless, and if I don't find something without a home pretty soon. So, yeah, it's a nice little story for us to finish up on.
I'm going to miss everyone here who are good friends. Don Wright is a good friend, very good friend, and Betsy Williford, Tom Blackburn, Cheryl Brownstein Santiago, and Howard Kleinberg, the editor, Dave Kraslow, the publisher, and everybody on the news side, all the reporters. But it's a time to move on right now, and that's something I'm looking forward to also, is to a very sharp and change in my career. Something I'm looking forward to, being Middle East correspondent for Cox newspapers and being based in Jerusalem. It's an exciting adventure that I'm about to embark on. So I have mixed feelings. I'm trying to look ahead, but you can't help but look into the past a little bit and feel, you've got to be unsettling, and it's upsetting, and it's too bad. It's a sad thing. Newspaper is a personality, and when a personality dies, it leaves a void. It is a business, obviously, as we're finding out, but it is, when you work in a newspaper, it's much more than a business. You don't work in it because it's a business. You work at it because it's a chance to do something, to change things, and to write, and to report, and to point out what's right and what's wrong, and try to fix things. We've had a lot of freedom on the editorial page. A lot more than most papers. Freedom of conscience, which is rare in any profession. And I was paid here every day to come in and express, hello, how are you?
Hi, Lou.
Good. You busy man. Mr. Yahashua Trigar, the former Consul General of Israel in Miami.
Yeah.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
These people are doing a documentary about the closing of the news.
Have a special toast to Mike Ward.
Yeah.
That's for
Ward.
I think it's going to get crazy.
Howard?
Voices on the same editorial page.
This is a hell of a column, but is he going to ever hear from Jerry Schwartz?
Did he leave out Schwartz?
Left out Jerry.
Perfect. Perfect.
I don't know where
He left out Schwartz. Lou wrote a whole column and he listed the names of all the respected letter writers and...
No, the most frequent letter writers, people he's come to know. You know, he left out Jerry Schwartz.
Good. You realize Schwartz won't be able to write a letter complaining about it?
That's right.
Good. Where is Lou?
I don't know where he is.
Even if I tell Lou about it, I will tell him not to put his name in.
No, I don't want Jerry.
In defense of Gerald Schwartz, Schwartz is one of the people we could depend on.
For what?
Because in his own way, he attached a certain amount of importance to what we were doing.
I'll never forget during the Six-Day War, he sent in a release to us that said on an Israeli action against the Arabs, it said exclusive to you in your area.
Sure, but you could depend on Jerry to count us in. I think he deserves to be mentioned.
That's wonderful. Better go find Lou. Where is Mahmoud?
He's in the composing room.
Is he?
Yeah.
What's he composing?
Putting the tapes together.
No, he isn't. I haven't improved it.
That's the 1925 picture of what Miami used to look like that I just stole off the editor's wall. Oh, yeah. My wife, who used to be in the newspaper business, always got the dictionaries. I'm a clock man myself. I like to get the clocks.
Yeah.
What's all this, fellas?
We want to know what your idea is. You have your idea yet?
I'm pretty well there. Yeah, I really am. Well, it's a cop-out because as a cartoonist, I'm going to have to resort to a lot of writing, I think, to say what I want to say. For a last cartoon, in a sense, I feel guilty about having to rely on words, but nonetheless, it's a big event, and I can't do it simply in one single drawing. So I'm going to get kind of preachy, I'm afraid.
Just a reproduction of the front page and the whole thing.
So that's the first...
That's the first page of the first paper, yes. It was on cream-colored newsprint. Don't ask me why they didn't use white in those days, but it was on cream-colored because they said they wanted to make it distinctive from another newspaper just up the road that was on pink or peach-colored newsprint.
So how long were you doing these historical features?
How long? I started them, I think, in 1980. one, which will be our last, will be 398. So I think it started in 1980.
I've done 7,400 columns on this newspaper. That's the equivalent. When I was hard up for a column the other day, I figured it out. It's the equivalent of 81 novels and pieces of art. And a damn sight rather done this than 81 novels instead of the 5 or 6 books I have done, because I'm a newspaper, and as you exist with what's going on around you, and you sort of, it's the present that turns you on.
I originally got this idea to do about 5 articles on the history of Miami because I felt it. We had lost or never conveyed a sense of a feeling of the roots of this community. And after about the 3rd one, the publisher, Dave Kraslow, said, I think we got a winner here. And he said, I think that if you don't mind, we can keep going on with this because we're getting very good reaction to it. And I said, I not only don't mind, I love it. I'm enjoying it. Yeah. And so the decision was made to keep going. And I would tell you now that had this paper, you know, not fallen upon the times it has, that this was an open-ended thing. I could have gone on forever, because when you go through that microfilm and through our picture files, between the people and the events, it's unlimited, the types of stories you can do in Miami history.
4:30. You have about 50 minutes.
How much?
50 minutes.
Come here, look at this. You leave this alone?
Yeah.
Huh? Leave him alone?
Yeah.
Does that say defiance?
Absolutely.
Ready to go?
Yes.
Funny enough?
Yes.
Lunacy?
Yes. Like it. Very good.
And there's one in here. The artist saved it because he's a fishing friend. Great, but here's a guy caught a 30,000-pound whale shark in 1912 in Miami. Look at the size of that thing. He took it on tour around the country, you know. So this guy who did it, this Captain Charlie Thompson, was a town character. He was a great fisherman. He wound up in his days taking Herbert Hoover fishing, Warren Harding, I think Franklin Delano Roosevelt, that kind of stuff. And so I've enjoyed doing it. I think the town has reacted very well to the pieces. I get more reaction to that than any form of punditry I might write on the editorial.
Fix the cue.
It's odd to me.
Here's something. That's beautiful. Yeah. Move your hand. Why don't you just do it that way?
Feel what way?
Without losing your teeth. Wait. Yeah.
Yeah, what?
See what happens when you do that. Yeah, leave it just like that.
What's happening is we're trying to put out the final edition of the Miami News. Well, I haven't been around, I haven't been back in the courthouse long enough, but I talked to Howard Kleinberg, our editor, and he says there was a great feeling of uneasiness during the afternoon, the feeling of uncertainty, which is, you know, we've been experiencing all week long, for some time before that. And I gather, once the court decision became known, and once the decision that we were going down tomorrow became known, I think I sensed that there was some feeling of not only sadness, but relief.
So what about Bill Baggs? That's funny, I was just writing about it. My last column leads off with Bill Baggs.
No, Baggs came here after him.
Yeah, I joined the paper on the staff in '50. Baggs was here, but he was just a reporter. He wasn't the editor yet. And, Baggs, I forget when Baggs became the editor, 55, something like that. Baggs, I think, and I don't mean to insult friend Kiesler or Wright, but I think Baggs best embodied the spirit of this newspaper and what it's all about. In fact, that's what I was using a Baggs anecdote on my last column to try to set the mood of what this paper's about. You want me to read it to you, this thing, or?
3 to 1, you got it wrong.
The way Bill Baggs told the story was that he had just returned from his second trip to North Vietnam in search of an ending to the long war, and as a lark, visited the then exclusive Miami Club. wearing a Mao Zedong button he had gotten in Hanoi. The sight of the crusading editor of the Lyman News wearing the hated button, as well as his front page columns calling on the United States to get out of the war, so upset one of the club members that he upchucked all over the front of bags. Swimming upstream can be messy. And we go from there because bags is that way. And, you know, the whole issue is, and I've heard so much of it lately, and it's all, you know, silly of whether a newspaper is supposed to reflect the opinion of community. Bags, you know, the way Bags was about the Vietnam War, the way Bags was about civil rights. If they took a referendum on civil rights in this town or in any of the big cities of the South in those days, there never would have been a civil rights bill. And it came to guys like Bags and Harry Ashmore in Little Rock and Ralph McGill in Atlanta to stand up to the thing. And that's the reason why I think the federal government had the guts to go ahead with the civil rights. But that, and of course, Martin Luther King. I mean, to ignore him. But you don't always go with community feelings.
Carolyn?
Carol.
Come here and check these eyes.
Check these eyes. Check these eyes.
Too big.
Huh? Great. Love it. What's decent?
I think you better start over. I don't think you got it.
That's right, Don.
Really? I mean, really, we ought to take another look at it. Get a pencil over there.
No, I don't have I don't know what happened to it.
So what does your contract say, Don?
Okay, it says to my colleagues Howard Kleinberg, Lou Stalomi, Betsy Williford, Tom Blackburn, and Cheryl Brownstein Santiago, thank you for the quality of this page. And to all those who took issue with my cartoons in anonymous and sometimes obscene notes, letters, and phone calls, and to those inside and outside journalism who believe editorial pages should be happy repositories of consensus, and that truth should be considered only as a non-essential attribute to the bottom line, I say,
Also, Xerox it, okay?
you want to send the Xerox down?
The Vice President, Kraslow.
Oh, That's on your editorial page.
What?
That.
What do you mean it's on my editorial page?
$50?
I think it's a bad mistake.
What?
I've been in the newspaper business for 38 years, and I've never allowed anybody in this newspaper to tell somebody to go fuck themselves.
Let me see it again.
Private discussion.
Doesn't work.
Hmm?
Doesn't work. You just took an emotional shit.
Truth should be considered only as a non-essential attribute to the bottom line. Common sense, truth should be considered only as a non-essential attribute.
You know what that phrase means?
Yeah, no, I don't know what the cartoon means exactly.
Hmm?
I don't know what the phrase means, but
Truth being a non-essential
Attribute to the bottom line.
bottom line comes first ahead of anything. Money. That isn't the part that bothers me.
He's overreacting to the nostalgic bullshit. He's not ashamed of shit. That's all.
I deserved that. I should have been told about it. I should have been consulted about it, not ignored.
Is he still in there? Is he still in there?
Whenever I get through, I think is the way it works. Pretty quick, Joel.
When's your deadline? 5 o'clock?
I think I can go 5:30. What time is it now?
It's about 2 minutes to 5, I believe.
Oh, I think I got a little time.
Probably will get drowned out by the larger issues involved. But was there some person in particular who was scared by it?
Is there any one person in particular? Actually, this was sort of a group decision. Honest to God, it was. And this cartoon was not done in a vacuum. It was checked out with Lou. We discussed it here. Everyone liked it. We never thought there would really be any problem with it. And then they were so shocked by it. So we discussed it, and they were rocking back and forth, saying, you know, what are we going to do? We got to have a Wright cartoon in. And I said, pull it. You don't really need a Wright cartoon in. And it's your decision, and it's not a question of censorship if I agree with it. So don't feel bad about using another cartoon, but they feel that they want my cartoon in. The last day, that this has never happened before, so we've agreed to solve the situation this way, quite amiably, and without raising the issue of censorship. They would have gone with it the way I wanted it, but in the spirit of fellowship, and the fact that this is the last day and we've been through a lot here, I'm going to do the best I can to change this so that it becomes more palatable to management, and I assume to the rest of the people on the outside. I need... Could you send someone in here who will take a detached view of what I'm doing and tell me that it's okay? Hello, Bill.
How you doing, Doc? Everything all right?
Thanks for those notes from Graham Greene. They got me in a hell of a lot of trouble.
I can see how we're getting it.
Don't blame me.
You see my wife?
Harold got a page one story?
Yeah, over the top it says, closing of the news could spur antitrust suit. You could have written that headline 6 years ago. It's that,
Oh, it's the Justice Department thing?
yeah. It does not have the results of the court hearing.
Well, the judge's decision was rendered. By 4:30, he had said, he was still reading his opinion, but by 4:30 he had said he was denying the motion for temporary injunction. Is hereby denied, and then he gave the rationale. But it was earlier than 4:30, so I don't see why they couldn't have gotten it in here.
If there was another morning newspaper in town, they would have gotten it in.
What we have here, and what we're going to miss most of all, is other people at some level of consciousness, eerily like ourselves, to where you can I mean, Wright can't draw a cartoon without a city room to work in. I sure as hell can't write a column without a city room to work in. I can write fiction, I can write novels, I can write articles, I can write anything, but I can't write a newspaper column without being in a newspaper office for the simple reason that I don't know what plays until I try it out on the same kind of minds. And the only way you can try it out is to go around and start arguments.
It's just unhealthy. I mean, it's goddamn unhealthy. And that's an unfortunate trend in American journalism. I mean, we're joining a long list of one newspaper towns. And at least as JOA, whatever one thinks of it, and you know, it has its flaws. At least as JOA kept an independent editorial voice going for 22 years. That was very important today.
There's an editorial in yesterday's Miami Times, which is the weekly black community newspaper, that talks about the Miami news and the danger. I don't agree with specifically what they're saying, but the danger of having only one major newspaper voice in town.
You get one viewpoint, and I think it's like how you used to like, or at least I'm old enough to like the way grocery stores used to be, or the way drug stores used to be. You could pick one that had a personality that suited you, and then the mom and pop hardware stores and everything else went down the drain. It's not just newspapers, and now we're going down the drain. It's more and more of a corporate structure operation, and newspapers are all losing some of their individuality, a lot of it, I think. Newspaper, even being part of a chain, this newspaper is a sort of a throwback to newspaper, and I think has a lot more, whatever, independent spirit, I don't know, characters or something than many less fortunate newspapers, but even so, as part of a chain, we've, I don't want to give an unfair impression, but we were ordered, like, you know, in effect, we had to endorse Nixon when it wouldn't have been the editorial vote. In our case, it's always been very rare, and that I can proudly say was an exception. But it's not an exception in most newspaper chains. To me, the idea of newspaper chain is at one and the same time a total self-contradiction, and in today's business world, I suppose, a total necessity.
I started as a copy boy, and wanted desperately to be a cartoonist more than anything else in the world.
From the very beginning?
Yes. That's why I really took the job as copy boy. I hoped to work my way into the art department. That never happened. I got sidetracked and became a photographer instead.
But you did finally reach that goal, that's correct?
Yes, I did. Quite indirectly, in an odd sort of way.
Very few people reach those kind of goals and to be successful as you are.
I didn't reach them so much as I kind of fell into them. I had there was a lot of luck, a lot of people who believed in me, and in spite of my temper tantrums and foolishness, saw some potential.
Baggs had an insight and a perception about newspaper people. I guess about life, for all I know. I'm not trying to idealize or idolize Baggs, but it's true, come to think of it. That could make him see things that a lot of other alleged editors would have missed, like this guy over here, Don Wright, our chap who draws these little pictures, that's won him a couple of Pulitzer Prizes. Came here like Howard out of high school. But Howard couldn't get a job here now. Neither could Wright, who's won 2 Pulitzers, and neither could I, because none of us went to college. But anyhow, he took Wright and listened to him seriously about maybe he wanted to draw political cartoons. This is a young photographer, just another photographer on the staff, and made an instant decision, yeah, this is what you should be doing. And later, when Baggs was asked how come he did this, he said, because Wright was the only photographer I ever saw that read that much. And now he's got 2 Pulitzer Prizes.
Was I pleased with the final version? No. What happened was perfectly human. I liked the cartoon. They thought it skirted over the edge and it got into what they considered to be it was an obscene gesture in their viewpoint. It was not in mine. And the fear is, of course, I think, that this could evolve into an issue of the cartoonist being censored. It simply is not a case of that. We sat down and talked about it, and this is pretty generally the way you ought to put out newspapers anyhow. Had conditions been different, perhaps I might have fought harder for the cartoon, but felt no need to do that. For a lot of reasons. The biggest reason is that these guys, and I'm talking now about Howard, who is the editor, and Dave, who is the publisher, have taken a lot of beatings for me. I think they've been subjected to a lot of criticism, probably threats, and I know a great deal of pressure because of a lot of the things that I've done. And they've never said one word to me about that, and they've never even hinted that I should stop doing what I'm doing, and they've never made any effort to kill a cartoon. The fact that they expressed some concern over this one was, of course, disappointing to me because I worked hard on the cartoon, but on the other hand, we had a meeting of the minds and decided quite amiably that if as long as I had the time to go ahead and change it so that there wouldn't be any doubts in their mind about taste. So we did. We changed it.
This is a stamp that Baggs, this is Baggs' stamp, that says on it, this is not a simple life, my friend, and there are no simple answers. And when he got these letters from people who were all upset with him, he would stamp this on the letter and mail it back to the person. When he died, I asked his widow, Freck, if I could have the stamp, and it's been sitting in my drawer, this drawer, previous office drawers for years. I've never used it. And today, the president of Cox Newspapers asked me to fax up to his office in Atlanta the stories that appeared in the Herald and the News today about the lawsuits against the News and the Herald and so on and so forth. And so I put all the articles together and faxed it. And then it occurred to me that for the first time in 20 years, I had a good way to use this stamp. And so on the covering thing, I hit it. This is not a simple life, my friend, and there are no simple answers. I probably won't use it for another 20 years, but it was well worth it. Probably the president of the company doesn't even notice it.
He was the total antithesis of any form of stuffiness or executive crap. I remember sitting in his office one day when one of the executives came in and told him what a good product he was putting out. He grabbed his three-piece suit and took him over to the window. We were on the river then, and said, you see those cars down there on Northwest 7? Said, they're products. He said, do you see all those people go by and wearing clothes? Said, that's products. Said, this newspaper isn't a product. This is a by God newspaper. And somehow that all, it would saturate you. And as a result, it would, anybody who wasn't of the same bent, in a way, I mean, anybody who didn't have the same idea about newspapers would probably go somewhere for other motivations. And anybody who really liked newspapering would probably go to work for Baggs. And we ended up, as a result, with quite an interesting staff for a long time.
The first won't be the last. We'll deal with it. See what they got. They always teach me a lot.
Dee, how do you spell your last name?
D-A-L-Y.
A good quality copy of it. Would you shoot it down to me right away? And once you can make a proof of, I don't know, we had some copies kicking around. There might be, go in my desk or drawer.
The irony is that the influence of the Miami News far exceeded its circulation, because it was read by a lot of influential people. It was read by the Herald.
It was a message to probably a rather select group of people. Mostly it was to journalists generally. No one on this paper. We have an excellent editorial page, and we've had a very courageous editorial page, and we have one today. But I think there are editorial pages that have not been courageous, that have been consensus-oriented, and they have not died. They're going on. Mine died, And my message was sort of, I guess you'd say, a challenge to them to try to remember why they're here and stop doing that.
You know, there are some people here who I guess I grew up with. Don Wright, John Kiesler in particular, Mort Lukov, a fellow that, you know, hasn't been around the newsroom, Art Grace, our racing editor, been with us for 37 years. He's out at the racetrack. I only get to see him once a year, but I'll miss him, even though I don't see him. And I'm going to miss the sunrises. We're going to have a sunrise here in a minute. And the most enjoyable part of coming to work early in the morning, and I'm a morning person, and I usually try to get to work, depending on the season, when that sun comes up, because it's a spectacular sight, and it really conveys the beauty of Miami.
Everybody got one?
Here we are. Farewell, Miami. Farewell.
Nice.
Did you read it?
Yeah. 7,500 columns later. Whoa.
Yeah, you think about that.
Breakfast.
We went over there a couple weeks later just to have lunch. And we walked by the boat and said, ladies, did you find work yet? Over Miami. We walked by kind of going like that. Don't even turn out.
That's yours, too, that one's yours, right? I didn't drop that.
You know, you can call me too.
Wait, we got more.
This is on the well, that's all.
Eva Marie Saint star in the hilarious comedy The Russians Are Coming, The Russians Are Coming, the WPBT Saturday night movie, Saturday starting at 8. At 10, stay tuned for Saint Elsewhere, followed at 11 by The Red Dwarf and John Cleese in Fawlty Towers, all Saturday on WPBT.
Next, violinist extraordinaire Isaac Stern, guest on Talking with David Frost. Just ahead on Memprovision.